Hi, and welcome to Tug of Heart. This is Lori. I'm here with Leroy. Hi, Leroy.
Hey Lori, how are you?
Very, very good. How's Florida?
Any better? I'd need an excuse.
There we go. That's what I like to hear.
Good,
And
good day.
for me, it's good too. It's one of those things where it's like I can't complain, but then if you have the visual, which you have, it's like no, really, I can't complain. There's a microphone right here, so not complaining. No complaints. So last time you and I, as is our tendency, we're all over the place. We started with having and wanting. From there, we kind of moved, having and being, excuse me. From there, we moved into wanting, the weight that it carries, and just, I mean, a whole lot of exploration. You enthusiastically explored my a little bit of my history and shared it, and we'll work out where we are with that privately. But good things happened. We finished kind of talking about, I don't know if you could say that it's another aspect of all this, being, wanting, having, what ising. And it led to the impatience ultimately and the consequences of impatience. And I think your finishing thought was that you had experienced some of this. I'm hoping that you mean that from your point of view, you've learned some of the consequences from your own experiences with impatience.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Thank you, Strong Island, for letting us do this. This has already been useful beyond what I could have calculated in the beginning.
It's
Just
therapy.
this time with my sister, and actually vocalizing and thinking just a little bit more about my responses. Um, Thank you. This is a great, probably the best therapy I've had. And I'm not saying that because it's me going through my own thoughts, but because it's us going through community thoughts.
Community
And
thoughts and get a
certainly
little bit of
helping,
feedback. Yeah.
yeah, considering some new things. When we left off, I think we left off with the consequences of impatience,
Right.
and that's huge. It's huge for me to think about it. Um, when I think about, I've always said one thing, and that is that the most costly thing in a person's life, certainly the most expensive in all of the monetary formats of things in my life, is regret.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And regret falls right into the consequence, a consequence of impatience.
Wow.
Chew on
Yeah.
that for just a second, and you can imagine from there all of the patterns of your makeup. You know, my entire put together is made up of impatience, regret, celebration. You start to see a pattern here. What I have is a bunch of ratios in my life, and I want to I want to increase the ratio of elation, delight, contentment, and I want to reduce the ratios of impatience. So when we look at the consequences of impatience, I guess I guess I would say, Lori, and
Mm-hmm.
you know me well,
Yes, I do.
I would say that many times in my life I've made knee-jerk reactions, impatient because of wanting something so much that I was willing to forego a basic calculation on practicality, true satisfaction, should the, you know, should you accomplish it? Should I actually have what I was aiming for? Um, so,
Yes, I
so
like
I
that.
think that there's a lot of consequences. And if you don't believe me, I guess I would start by saying, I was going to say something really funny, but it's not really funny. But there's a lot of consequences with impatience. And I think about childbirth and people that aren't ready. And I think, I mean, um, I have I have a child. She was born when her mom was pregnant when I was 19.
Oh
I
my
was
gosh, it doesn't
impatient.
feel like that. Yeah.
Right? I was impatient to start life. I was impatient to grow up. And while I started probably before I was ready because I was impatient, the consequences my child bears because I was not, equipped. I was not financially solid. And so when we talk about the consequences of impatience, it's not just within my own consequences that affect me alone, but those around me.
Oh
A
my
little person
gosh.
I brought into this world. I have to sadly admit that she has suffered some of the consequences for my impatience. And that's tough. That's tough to
The
think about.
reckoning of
But
it, yeah.
in we all do the best that we can, and we identify and work and overcome. But it doesn't dismiss the fact that there are consequences to impatience.
Absolutely. That's stark what I'm hearing you say here because it makes me think of my own time. Anyways, go on. I'm sorry.
So I think that's just something that's kind of hitting me a little bit heavy right now. So forgive me, that's a little bit of a tough topic, especially now as I think about my daughter, and I haven't seen her in a little bit, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing her in short order. But impatience, kind of as a general rule, um, I think an episode back, or maybe two episodes back, um, we were talking about hyper focus,
Right.
and one of the things when we get hyper focused on wanting things and achieving things, uh, because we've been talking about wanting and versus having, and having versus being. But when we want things and we get hyper focused on um, achieving benchmarks, whether it's an acquisition, a promotion, a relationship, we, in our haste, because all of us want to be high achievers, I believe, at least I know I do, and I know you do, Lori.
Mm-hmm.
In our haste to achieve, we probably sideline um, some of the really well thought out calculations that we should probably spend a lot more time dealing with, um, so that we can at least minimize the consequences of impatience. So how do we get patience? How do we learn to be patient? Well, another thing, and then I'm going to turn this over to you so that you can kind of help steer me through my life. Um, when we talk about patience and how do we get it, as we go through the other episodes, and I'm trying to kind of stitch all of these together. So I hope that anybody who's listening has listened to some of the other ones. Otherwise, this might not make any sense. Um, I think we have to be content. We have to. Part of having patience is finding a satisfaction, a contentment with what we have right now. Leroy, what you have right now is enough. It's enough that you can slow your commitment to goals. You can slow your commitment to having, not dismiss, but slow and calculate. Make calculated decisions so that you can minimize the consequences of impatience.
Right.
And with that, I'll yield back.
Hey, somebody's been watching some Senate trials here, or Congress, something. I yield the floor. Actually, that's a reasonable way for me to know not to interrupt, because I interrupt so much, and it stems from my impatience. Somebody lights that little.
Genius.
You interrupted.
Get it? I get it.
Yes, because we both
get
do
it.
this. You know what happens? It triggered a light in you, and it's like, I must respond while it's there, because it will be lost. All will be lost, right? So we inject.
Possibility. That is a
Because
possibility.
we also have a little bit better long-term memory than short-term memory.
True.
Those that have been on the other side of a kitchen fight with us know this to be true.
Testify, sister, testify.
You remember back in 80s when you did this? No, I'm talking about this morning. What happened this morning? No idea. Makes for a tough partner to fight with. Anyways, you actually stole my punchlines. I was writing these notes as you were talking, because the two words that came to mind for me when you were talking about the consequences were satisfaction and contentment. And I think I'll just kind of go back to where you began with Zaina, Leroy's daughter, for those of you who don't know, little Z. Well, so when you hear us say Z, it's Zaina. And then it quickly made me connect to like our own experience with our parents, who weren't so patient at times, like any parent. And without doing, opening up all of that, I just want to say that one of the things that as parents and as humans that we quickly overlook is the residual damage we can leave all around us, either from not seeing that we're hurting somebody, or for not seeing that like what we're shooting for, aiming for in life can just bypass that. And there's this like effect of friendly fire also for the people around us when our focus is only the target and we miss, right? That means something has been just very potently let out into the world, and it still lands. It lands. If we missed, it lands on somebody, and it can hurt. And for me, one of the things that's always at my heart is, I say this repeatedly, the very young and the very old. And this hurts me the most, is because I see our tendency to be impatient with the very young and with the very old. And we will do this at times. It can take on different forms, but one of the ones that I'm aware of in myself is when it's not even like it almost comes from a spirit of helpfulness, but it's again not having the wherewithal to think it through. So you're helping, but you're impatiently helping somebody. You just quickly tie their shoes, right? Older, younger. And this is not, I'm not retelling something, but I'm imagining an example so you know. And sometimes you have to sit there and patiently let people struggle things out, which is kind of a theme we brought forward. And you do it by being patient. I remember this actually. So the very young, the very old, and the very Leroy. I'm going to add to it because you've seen when me and you get ready, and I will get very impatient at the end because Leroy finishes getting ready to get out the door in the same way all the time. And for me, when I'm ready, I'm like, what's going on here? I'm the girl, you're the guy. Like if I'm ready, we go. Okay, we go, but first he's going to stand. He's going to kind of shake his pant leg out, see where it lands, and then he's going to fix the cuff on the bottom of his thing. right back at you, Leroy. So you didn't notice, but like it can drive me to impatience to wait that 2 seconds because I'm like, seriously? But it's your way. And the flip side is, while I could feel impatience, part of that impatience lies in awe that you do that, and it's a kind of an expansion of my awe that can be also envy because I wish I would have an eye or a mind for such details because it's one of my favorite qualities about you. You do things well and once. And that requires patience when people do that. And people are made different ways. So where you have that aspect of your being, I will try a million things. And it takes, in love for me, a form of patience to tolerate my way because what we come to at this point in our life, I hope, at least occasionally, is that both have their merits. And relationally, it can become a beautiful thing when there's a little patience. Now, not tolerance, because I demand at least, at minimum, from my brother, way beyond tolerance. I'm not a fan of tolerance. You know, to me, it's as good as an F you, but I'll leave you alone. So, does this make sense at least to begin?
Very, very much so.
So, how
I
patience?
like, I like,
Okay.
I like where you're going with this. And I think I would ask you,
Mm-hmm.
are we more impatient with, I'm thinking about you and making time and, you're in your own way, you are patient beyond practical.
Right. People say I'm very patient, but inside
So
the
I
experience
wonder,
is
I wonder if
different.
it's I wonder if we are most impatient as we consider the consequences of impatience. Are we most impatient with things that are deficits in our own life?
Oh my gosh. I I felt a little wounded, so I'm going to liken that to acknowledgement of truth because it hit. So possibly. What do you I think yeah, it could be, right? When we
So,
see those bits of us that we have an excess or we are in want of, and in this I mean in its true sense lacking, that we can become very impatient in the witnessing of it.
so we go back like 3 episodes
Okay.
and we talk about having and being.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we're talking about impatience.
Mm-hmm.
And so impatience is kind of the wrestling of organic timeliness, because things kind of just happen, and it's our impatience that moves them forward, perhaps at an inorganic schedule.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
therein lies the consequences. I mean, we're trying to influence the natural order of things.
100%. That's the aim. Yeah.
And so I think that it gets a little bit, I mean, I think I look back on my life and I think back, you know, to wanting, having, being, and it was like, okay, I wanted a relationship really bad. I'm going back to a conversation about Z. And I was like, oh, if I had this, my life would just kind of follow suit. This is a really frightening disclosure because I mean, I'm getting into a little bit uncomfortable territory
Good.
because it is so real. But if I think back, I was like, well, if I just had a child, so then I created a relationship that, I wasn't prepared for. Um, my companion at the time, somebody I cared deeply about, still do, we communicate, but she wasn't ready. But we said, okay, as a way to fix the dissatisfaction with our current life, we're going to play house. for lack of a better, analogy. And
Right.
so that includes up to and including a child. So we're going from trying to understand our own cohabitation to, hey, let's bring another tenant into this.
It was fun. It was fun with two of us. We made a fun mess with two of us. Let's see what three can do.
If two's good, three's really going to be something. So we kind of embezzled the task of parenting
Well, and kind of like I can say
through
this
our
now.
impatience.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
embezzling is not a romantic word.
No.
I mean, that is not that's not a word that we like to sit around and, I mean, that's a punchline at a party. But 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 there's a consequence to that, and that consequence, you know, there's a lot of really good consequences, because I guess we should include that. So there's some good consequences, but there's some really challenging consequences that have long lasting, presence in our life. And this is not just talking about child rearing and starting too early. This is about, you know, travel, or, I mean, anything that, impatient, traveling before your vehicle's prepared. I mean, we can bring this down to like any different level, I mean, there's a certain amount of, so now we're going to talk about consequences, and that's going to lead to next week, which will be preparation,
Okay.
commitment and preparation, because the consequences are so weighty.
Oh my gosh. Tell me.
So now we can kind of stitch these together a little bit.
Well, let me tell you. So, because of the word that I see recurring here is the satisfaction and contentment that we're using alongside patience and impatience. And you began by saying that you created this relationship in your wanting. And the part about that is, I think, if I was going to look at it, and looking from the outside in is like so much clearer, right? Than having
Naturally.
than being especially on the inside looking in. Like the view is different. This is something I could not apply to my own life, but it becomes pretty evident when I'm hearing what you're saying. And it's like it's just a little slight tiny adjustment of tenses that I see you speaking of, because you're saying there's a discontentment kind of in me, a longing, a wanting, something's missing. I get a baby. Not to dumb it down. What I heard was, I get a baby. and then it's like, yo, what's up? You're supposed to fix me. So one of the first like red flags from the outside looking in is like, well, when you don't have contentment after involving a soul, a human life, should you rethink your method and your means, or can that so quickly turn to, I'm going to look at the object and where it fell short, right? As opposed to the means. And so you have to separate out the means, the method, and object. And I would not want to say that about a human, but that's why you have to let this object return to a human, because a relationship is a continuum. You can't accurately speak today, and this is not a scolding, but we cannot accurately speak today about our children in a complete way because it's ongoing. We can say where we stand now in the continuum, but the rest is yet to be seen. Who you and Zaina are on your final day or hers is who you will have been ultimately. So it's not finished. So you have to have that spirit of patience, right, with the relationship, because it is its own life. You began a new life with this young, beautiful lady now. And so you have to give it that respect. So going back to contentment and satisfaction and wanting, when we're wanting something, and you have to say, do I want to be patient? How would I be patient while I'm wanting? They seem kind of contradictory or feel that way to me because of my own habits. But one of the things that helps me is to think like when I'm waiting or wanting, and what I do with that time of wanting should be in a state of contentment, if possible. Now, we're humans. Things we can we're so creative at fouling things up, but at least as an ideal, or at least as a thought, to kind of let slowly enter into us and hopefully help us. To be content is a passive act. It's a thing of being passive. Content, where I'm at, is okay. It's not necessarily being complete, but it's not without. It's accepting and okay with that. Where satisfaction is like an active something. It's like a resolve, so it's also temporary. But so if I'm dissatisfied while I'm waiting, it's aggravating. It's unbearable. Because I'm seeing what I wanted as a means of satisfaction. So until that happens, I'm dissatisfied. Now, if I want something, but I'm able to say, but I'm also good now. This is something I further want from like you had said, a point of curiosity, exploring, versus I need that now to finish something in me. And the fact is, you could be incomplete. I can be a complete wreck. And I'm not complete. I think when I think of patience, I always, the DMV, period, because this is how I see my patience. You're waiting at the DMV when we could wait like in a crazy way. And I remember seeing kids like under the chair squirming. One time I was at the DMV and I kind of felt like, I felt better about myself than I should have because I sat there with the appearance of patience. And I did this like really silly thing where I'm imagining myself like, somebody had said to me like, oh, you're so patient. And what I wanted to say was just like become the sage. And I wanted to, like shake my hair out and just become wise and tell them, I'm feeling exactly what you're feeling while I'm waiting. I wish I was at the front of the line too. This is seriously all happening, Leroy, when I was at the DMV. I'm imagining this like a grandiosity of myself, if that's a word. And I wanted to say, like, I'm feeling exactly what you are. What makes me patient is the way I'm behaving on the outside. That's the difference. That's where I was at that time. But that is, to me, where patience can begin, is with the act of like controlling your being, your vessel, at least. That's a start. Because I think sometimes we get to things by this inner work, and sometimes inner work happens with this outer physical discipline first. And that's where you were talking about the it being organic. This is what actually triggered all this line of thinking. And the timeliness, right? So we also can't demand that things happen because in our inorganic order of things, like you had said, again, coming back to what you said, or you said inorganic schedule, right? So I can't say, when the spark reaches my heart and it's turned, I plan on being patient and I'm going to be the best damn patient person you ever saw. When that something, because we're all born with this kind of angst, we want something, we don't know what it is. I've spent so many days of my life when this something that I haven't named happens inside, I'm going to be fabulous. One of the things I've learned in life, though, is I won't be here long enough for that. So I start some of the physical work until then. And so it's not like I'm waiting for, because that becomes magic, a spell, no work involved. And it's like so simple and plain when I'm saying it now, it's like laughable. But for my thinking, I really could not see this for years. I really could not see that discipline can sometimes work in a way that feels like a reverse way, because the outside is displaying something, and by continually displaying it, something is having to shift inside, right? What do you think about this? Because I want to say I've been waiting for something to happen in me to exercise. And I was recently kind of shocked when you're like, yeah, I've been exercising. I'm like, one of the things I asked you is like, well, what happened? Like, and maybe something did, but I'm like, because I want to arrange for that to happen to me. Because it's like I think something will happen inside to stir, to activate, motivate, whatever you want to call it. Leroy, if you can expand on exercise, because it's an outside in thing, because something is happening, but what direction does it happen in? A lot of questions.
So, like, yeah, so many good things there. The exercise. I'm gonna actually make a note of that, because I'm gonna try and take these in order in which I'm.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I want to take these in order in which I'm fascinated by what you say. A lot of as we work through this, I'm gonna tell you, like, today's a really good day. Episode 4, Strong Island. Thank you, because I just figured something out
Oh,
in what you're saying and in what I'm saying. And if I want to be more patient, I should probably consider my child's patience with me as I
oh,
learned how to become a parent, when she had no other choice but to be patient.
you just broke my heart.
So I just assigned her
That's beautiful. You're right.
this
For all of
job
us.
of, like, I literally just said, hey, be patient with me as I learn how to become a parent, because I was impatient. You're a product of impatience. I wanted something that would give my life direction and purpose and meaning. So I created a family.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I should be patient with her by choice. I mean, I'm the parent,
Right.
because I literally assigned her the job, the duty of having patience with me.
Right.
So that was like,
Outside her, at least young free will to some extent.
yeah.
It's big, right? It's a big responsibility. I'm
And
thinking
then
this with
I
my own children too. Actually, yeah, it's big.
like in the first time I recorded with you, Lori, I was telling you about our dad, and I have. It's funny, because I have patience. I have a lot more patience now than I ever have. I am more pleased with the level of patience that I have now as compared to other times in my life.
Me too. I've said this many times. Yes.
So I am so aware of what dad taught me. A lot of them is just mechanical aptitude, nothing else. But in that mechanical aptitude was problem solving and rationalizing kind of where you were. I think about vehicles, because people always ask me, like, man, where'd you learn how to fix stuff? I love to tinker with things. And I always say, like, well, my daddy always said, and I live my life saying, my daddy always said.
Right.
My daddy always said, well, it's already broken. What are you going to do? Break it more?
Yeah, I could see.
And so he'd say, take it apart,
Right.
Well, that didn't work. Well, let's try something else, And so he was very patient. And now that I'm on this other side, and I don't say that I know everything about mechanics or building or whatever, but as I have learned more, I can only celebrate his patience by being patient myself and giving that away.
Right. Oh, wow. Wow.
Because for it to stop here and for me to say, like, yep, I know how to do this, great, hit the high note, exit stage left. No, that's not how it works. So when I went on this camping trip last time, there's a young guy who I've done some business with. He's a young guy, just he's got infectious enthusiasm for um, for work and providing a living, and he's prideful and he has his own place, and he's part of a cohort. I included him in a little cohort that we have of about 5 people, and we show up in different places, and we've gone from the east coast of Florida to the west coast of Florida, and camped out and stayed at his place, and we always try to teach him things. We're like the de facto um, parents,
Theos.
me and the rest of the guys that are similarly aged, all good looking, especially me.
What,
But
how they,
but
yeah.
so we try to teach him things. So as we went on this trip, when I was piloting my hand, and you were saying like, "Oh, that's great. That's like just being," and I said, "No, just come on out. We'll figure it out." And he had an impact. And this is a little side story. And he needed to have his brakes done, but the brakes weren't. It wasn't just the brakes; it was the brakes and the rotors. And so it's kind of a little. And this is on a big 3/4 ton truck. And so we're teaching him and we're showing him, okay, now let's put it all back together. And he puts it back together, and he's got a little impact driver. If nobody knows what a little impact driver is, it looks like a little cordless drill, but it's a ratcheting mechanism that adds torque, so it really tightens bolts. And as he was putting things together, tuck, 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 oh, he snapped one off.
Even I know what's in his future there.
How many tugga does it take? Well, he gave it one too many.
I winced when you said that.
And so he gets mad, and he starts throwing his stuff, and he's like, dang it, what? Why didn't you tell me? I'm like, well, because there is no substitute for experience.
Oh.
to teach you patience. And he's like, oh, now what am I going to do? I'm like, well, first thing you're going to do is you're going to calm down and have a couple of chips. Now we're going to look like, okay, clean your hands. Now we're gonna call around and find out who's got a grade 8 bolt this long and da 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 da. And fortunately, you've got plenty of, captive audience here as we camp that we'll get you up to the parts store. And so then he goes and he picks up some replacement bolts, and he comes back, and we have to take it apart, and we extract the broken bolt inside the caliper. And the funny thing is that when it was all done, he looked at me and he says, Leroy, I don't even know why I was getting frustrated. I probably couldn't be in better company for this to happen. And he said, I had no business doing that. Sorry, I got flustered. And so there is the passing of the baton of patience.
Yeah.
Because there's consequences for not having the patience to teach him patience.
That's what I was thinking, because I would be impatient if somebody behaved like that.
Right?
Yeah.
And then there's consequences for him at a young age not having patience.
Right.
So that's kind of that's a side story that
I like that though, yeah.
To interject. But there's a consequence to me not imparting in whatever way I can, me collectively with a group of people, imparting patience to him, because he sees how casual we are. He snaps a bolt off in there, and he's like, he wants us to feel what he feels, but because we have been through this before, what you hear is, we just open a beer, We got patience. We've seen.
One of you was probably shaking your head yes while he did it.
Yeah, that's right.
Here we go.
We're teaching you how many tuggas it takes. It's not 3. So yeah, I think as we go back to the consequences of impatience, I don't know, but I know that had we not had this little experience, which is funny in the end, there would be a consequence to having the ability to share patience, an example of patience, and a consequence for him had he not witnessed patience and
Right.
learned a little bit more. I mean, we're not responsible for the orchestration of his life and, things that we want to champion, but certainly to participate. If we didn't participate in displaying patience, there would be a consequence for him and a
Right.
consequence for us, knowing that
Eh,
we had that opportunity and we didn't take it. So I'm learning a lot in this moment. And this is a conversation for those of you that are listening, all one of you. Um,
Hi, Steve. Joanne already dropped
yeah.
us.
Hi, Steve and Joanne,
Hi,
our
we have
spouses.
two.
Um, I'm learning. This is no notes. This is just kind of showed up, topic in mind, and here we go. And I am learning more through the exploration of patience and having the patience to try this new.
Right. And that's, I think, the point. And it just the shift in perspective of it can change something from that negative consequence to positive consequence. What you're saying there, and also here, this could be a chore. What we're doing, right? If it was like a type of obligation, and it remains that, but in choice, it's a beautiful thing for me to have the time with you, and I can't think of a better way to like do some self-examination. Hey, one of the things for starters, it's very difficult for me to tell myself historical lies. Well, I do some self-examination when I'm with you. You've been there, you've seen it, but it's healthy in being put in a place where you have to disclose, because we learn a lot. Like one of the things that we spoke about while we're doing this is you're like, listen, we're not going to be like preaching, because that can be such a temptation, and one that I fall into myself. But the fact is, we learn the most from all the sloppiness and the ugly in life. I can't think of too many beautiful things that I've learned as much from as the ugly things that I have. When I think of your story, you could have stopped him before he did it. Like, because part of me is like, teaching patience, uh, masochism. Like, where's the line? Like, do you could you could you have intervened? Was there no entertainment value?
Could have gone this whole
Bet
session without you bringing that up, but yeah, there's.
side bets. It's neither here nor there now, because the fact of the matter is, until he experienced that burning, I like to call it the coals on the head moment, he's not ready to hear or witness the outcome that could, the alternative, let's say, right? And so there's something that requires that experience of the coals on the head in the DMV. So going back to that, I want to be like all knowing at the DMV and wise, whatever. No, I've just done it before, and I know, like, having a fit makes the time go even slower, and it's more painful.
As we go through this, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, and that is, there's an organic timeliness,
Right.
you know, to patience. And did we do it right? I don't know. Could we have done it different? I don't know. Probably wouldn't feel the same by not, you know, stand back. He had to learn the limits of a grade 8 bull, 10 millimeter. I mean, he just learned it,
He does it a
or a
couple
12
more
millimeter.
times, and he'll have that skill you have.
Right. So as we kind of go through this, it reminds me of a story that somebody told me. And this kid graduates, and he graduates with high marks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, okay, I have everything I need to go. And I want, because we always talk about want, or we often talk about want, he says, I want to be the CEO of a large corporation. So I'm impatient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule a meeting with a CEO of a big corporation, no matter how long it takes. And so he finally finds somebody who agrees to meet with him in 3 weeks. He's like, okay, I'll wait 3 weeks. And he's just like, every day he's calling, like, did he get an opening? Did anything else break free? Finally, he shows up and he goes up to the top floor. The guy says, welcome, come in, have a seat. The kid goes in and he has a seat, and the CEO says, how can I help you? And he says, well, I just graduated from college, top of my class, and I aspire to sit where you sit. I want to be the CEO of a big corporation. That's what I want. That's what my heart desires. I feel that's what I was destined for. That's what I want to do. Can you tell me how to do that? And the CEO looks at him, takes his glasses off, sits down, and he's like, I've never been asked this question before. And the guy says, feeling pretty good about himself, thinks he really came up with something brilliant. And he's like, yeah, well, I was at the top of my class. And the CEO says, to be the CEO of a large corporation, he says, it's really easy. There's only one rule. And the guy's like eager. He's got his paper out. He's going to write verbatim what the guy says next. And the guy says, the CEO tells him, just don't ever make any mistakes. And the kid starts writing down. He's like, what do you mean don't make any mistakes? He says, yeah, just don't ever make any mistakes. You can be the CEO of nearly any corporation you choose. And he says, well, how am I going to know how not to make mistakes? The CEO tells him, you will have made them.
What?
The CEO tells him, don't make any mistakes. The kid says, how am I going to know how not to make mistakes? And the CEO tells him, because you will have made them.
Okay.
And that tells you about patience. You're going to make them. There's no shortcut.
Right. Okay.
You have to have that patience. The consequences of not having that is to not have an intimate understanding of what it takes to be a CEO. From pushing the broom to delivering the mail, to assembling the desks, to being a support staff, good support staff. Well, support staff and then good support staff, and then staff, and then you go through it until you become the CEO. But there's no shortcut to patience. And a consequence is to not be able to execute. I had, when I first came to Florida, I had a line and antenna company.
The satellite.
And we put, not satellite.
Oh.
Radios.
Okay.
Cell phone towers.
Right.
And I remember when I first got here, and I was feeling pretty good about what I did in New Mexico, and I, had very subtle and moderate success doing what I did through hard work. And then I came here and I had some time on my hands, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And you know what I noticed? I noticed that everybody, no matter what, had a cell phone. And I'm like, that's an industry I probably need to know about. I said, okay. So then I set out to find contacts in this, and where does the work come from, and how do I get to Verizon, and how do I get to AT&T, and how do I get to, the various carriers. And I said, man, this is really a lucrative field. I like it. I want to be a part of it. And so the first thing I did, before ever attempting to go to work or build a company, is I went out and I bought a harness.
I'm sorry, Tourette's. Which was rude that I said that.
I bought a climbing harness.
Go ahead.
What are you going to do with that? Well, I guess I'm going to go climb something. So then I got a hold of a company that leases out tower space, and was able to show up at a tower and figure out how to wear a harness and then climb, and how to tie off, and what the rules are, and okay. And then I got up there, and I'm like looking around, and like, wow, there's a lot going on here, and all of a sudden I was just taken by all that went on a tower. Didn't know about the 3 sectors and alpha, beta, gamma. It was so much new. And the reason I took that time is that was probably like one of the first times where I had to exercise patience, because I knew I couldn't be at the mercy of staff or climbers. Because if you can't do what they do,
Right.
who's in charge of your company?
Mm-hmm.
When they get mad and say, if I'm not going, why don't you get up here and do it yourself? Let me go get my harness.
Let me see
I
if
will. Thank you. You're relieved of your post. But the point is that you have to have patience, because the consequence of not having patience is not understanding, or not just not understanding, but not having empathy for the climber.
Right. And as you're telling the story, and then I'll let you finish, I just want to say this, unrelated. Everything you said, I heard with a mental rendition of When I Fall from Bare Naked Ladies playing in the background. Carry on.
That was a window washer.
I know, but the height, it's appropriate.
So I think that patience is like patience with Christopher, the kid with the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
Patience with taking the time to understand what it takes to put on a harness, what it takes to be in a tower, what it takes to climb the tower, what it takes to be in their position. Just like the CEO said, that's simple, just don't ever make mistakes. Well, how am I going to know how not to make mistakes? You will have made the mistakes because you will have started at the bottom as a neophyte and just worked your way. There's just no substitute for experience, and with experience comes patience, and with patience comes an obligation to share patience. And I think that the consequences of not having patience are huge. They're huge. They're huge if you're a business owner. They're huge if you're not patient with your spouse. They're wildly,
Sometimes irreversibly so.
irreversibly
Yes, the cost.
detrimental
Yes.
to not having patience with your children.
And that's the thing of don't make a mistake, or you can't be that CEO. You cannot be the king of your dominion in the household. And the greatest mistake would be that lack of patience. That's it can become an irreversible if you let it get to that size, right?
You said dominion, all I heard was minions, and I'm thinking of the little cartoon with the goggles.
I'm thinking the dominion, your kingdom, survey your kingdom.
Yeah, no, I liked it.
But minions.
It's funny what words trigger in your own
Oh my gosh, yeah.
catalog of videos.
Your catalog of videos.
So I think that's
good stuff, right? And I think
I definitely want to call my daughter, and I want to thank her for her patience that she was assigned.
And be patient if she doesn't answer first time it's ringing. She's at that age,
She's been at that age for like 12 years.
Yeah. I've been at that age. She's got a lot of work ahead of. She's going to catch up to my record. I don't answer at the first call.
It's a great time to embody patience and be a good example for her.
Yes. Thank you.
We got about 5 minutes left to go, and this is starting to kind of really become there's a little discomfort, not really knowing how it's going to play out. And then now we're starting to get to where today is like, it's a really good learning experience for me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, with just without trying, effortless, understanding. And it's, you know, we've gone through this and we're trying to stitch them together as best we can. And I think it's really starting to take root for me.
That's good.
I like it.
In the words of this man I know, well, Leroy, well, and it's a word, 2 words. You're welcome. Right back at you.
Well played, Lori. Well played.
Thank you for those who have joined us. Please like and share, and also like and share Strong Island Radio, where we are. Until next time, thank you, Leroy, and everybody listening, please farewell.
Tú también. Adios.
Bye.